Okay, thanks, Larissa. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Counselors of Real Estate, welcome to this special presentation of Geopolitical Chess, Succeeding in an Uncertain World. Thank you for joining us today. I'm John Henschel, CRE, Global Chair of the Counselors of Real Estate and President of Henschel Real Estate Services in Abingdon, Maryland. The Counselors of Real Estate is a global organization of commercial property advisors addressing real estate challenges worldwide. Experienced, innovative, principled, and credentialed problem solvers, counselors reside in 22 countries, practice in many more, and offer expertise in 60 real estate disciplines across all real estate asset classes. Each has earned the prestigious CRE designation, representing a badge of distinction and a commitment to excellence. Let's recognize the exclusive sponsors for today's event, Equus Capital Partners and RELPI. Thank you both for your partnership with the counselors. Before we begin, I'd like to offer you a free digital subscription to the counselor's peer-reviewed professional journal, Real Estate Issues. It's been named one of the top 10 essential real estate publications in the United States. Please visit cre.org/REI to subscribe. You're encouraged to utilize the Q&A feature should you wish to ask a question. Your participation is welcome, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, David Levy, CRE Managing Principal and Partner of Milestone Investment Research, LLC, in Greater Boston. Prior to Milestone, he was a Managing Director of Portfolio Management and Research and Strategy at Bentall Green Oak. David was invited to membership in the counselors in 2014. Welcome, David and Frank, and we look forward to an interesting conversation.
Thanks, John. Thanks for the intro. Hello, everybody. As John had said, I'm an active member of the New England chapter of the Counselors of Real Estate. I'm also chair of the Virtual Programming Committee, the committee that plans and delivers these monthly What's Next webinars for all of you. So today we have an international real estate audience of well over 110 attendees. So thanks for joining, especially during the summer lull and across time zones. Before we get started, I just want to recognize that the counselors to date have held over 50 What's Next for Real Estate and the Life Experience webinars since delivering the first episode back in 2020. So thanks to all of you for watching and for participating. And all past sessions are recorded and available for review on our website at cre.org. And if anyone has a topic they'd like to see covered, send us a note and we'll consider working it into this or next year's schedule. Our last webinar on geopolitics was back in October, 6 days prior to the US presidential election. Today, we're about 6 months since the Trump administration assumed control of the White House, and 2 weeks before the latest tariff deadline. Timing of today's What's Next webinar on geopolitics seems almost serendipitous. You know, the counselors, in addition to issues, also publishes their annual top 10 issues affecting real estate. And over the last 2 years running, geopolitics and political unrest have scored as one of the top issues of this survey, and I've been told it's going to reappear in the top 10 in this year's upcoming publication. And as you all know, geopolitical tensions and events continue to be widespread across the globe, causing volatility and uncertainty, which directly or indirectly have caused many investment decisions to pause. And I, probably like many of you, have had a few deals or clients recently confess, hey, pencils down, at least until some clarity reappears. So today we're once again privileged to have Frank Kelly help us navigate geopolitics around the globe, to unpack these major risks or opportunities and provide us with some explanations or warnings of potential impacts these forces might have on the real estate industry. For any of you who are not familiar with Frank, he is the founder and managing partner of Fulcrum Macro Advisors, LLC. He leverages more than 30 years as a senior Wall Street executive after beginning his career in Washington, D.C., while serving 2 presidential administrations as well as at the SEC. In fact, I just found out that Frank is cited in a recently published book entitled Inside the Reagan White House, written by Frank Lavin, who he worked for within the Office of Political Affairs, and admits this may have been his most exciting job ever. Frank possesses extensive geopolitical experience and offers his clients the opportunity to not only understand political risk, but how to succeed in these challenging settings. He presents frequently to leading global institutional investors and corporations and has become, over the last 3 years, a repeat special feature with the counselors. Frank, the counselors truly value the relationship we forged with you since your keynote address at our annual conference in Boston 3 years ago. So thank you.
My pleasure. Have fun.
I also want to recognize that I'm a reader of your frequent newsletters, whether it's the Global Week Ahead, Weekend Reads, or any special topic that you put out, because they're insightful and comprehensive when I'm trying to monitor global geopolitics. And I know over half the audience today requested, when they registered for today's event, a subscription to your U.S. Financial Regulatory Week Ahead newsletter. So if others wanted to be added to your distribution, what's their best option? Should they contact you or the counselors?
Yeah, you can contact me. The email's fkelly, Kelly, at fulcrummacro.com. I have a Substack called Perspectives, which is free. Put it all out on that. Or just go to my website, fulcrummacro.com, and you can sign up there as well. So I put that stuff out for free, and my wife thinks I'm nuts, but I have a lot of fun doing it, and it offers a lot of opportunity for discussion, and so help yourself.
Great. Thanks, Frank. So today's webinar is going to last until just short of the hour. I've got questions for Frank, but just as importantly, we want to hear from you. So as John had said, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to pose questions in real time. We're not going to wait until the end for questions. So I'll do my best to field your questions and have them answered by Frank. So Frank, this is a crazy time to stay on top of weekly and daily geopolitical news and events. Trump administration continues to unfold, whether related to the policies of the Big Beautiful Bill, the evolution of global tariffs and trade deals, immigration and deportation activities, DOGE budget cuts, the risk of a Fed independence, Middle East tensions, Russian-Ukraine war. Honestly, there are dozens more that we've talked about and you see every day in the news. So much in the spirit of the counselor's top 10, how would you rank or prioritize the major geopolitical issues facing us today? And where would you even start?
Well, again, David, thank you. And thanks to everybody joining today. And I do have to confess, when I'm doing these, any sort of presentation to a group anymore, it's terrifying. I'm literally, if you've seen me, I'm sitting here, I'm not texting anybody, I'm just checking email, because you go on stage or you go on screen and it's like, if you're not up to the second, you get that question. And this is a perfect example of it. As you were doing stuff, here's literally in the last 5 minutes, the president is doing one of his long, Q&As with reporters in the Oval Office, to which he said, I'm probably going to fire Jay Powell soon. Okay. That's just breaking in my emails. But, I think this is the problem for investors. And certainly the media loves it because it makes for great headlines and it's eyeballs and clicks, which is money. And there's all of this stuff, which is sort of the here and now, but there's the bigger themes that, for longer term investors, what are those things that are, particularly from the geopolitical side? I think, bar none, it's still China, right? It's the two largest economies in the world, and how are they working it out, so to speak, right? In terms of, you see it in the tariff war. I know we've talked about this in the last call we did. There's so much change taking place in China. Much of it you can't see because it's shielded. It's blocked. But You've got still very serious economic challenges internally. Nobody trusts any of the economic numbers, the 5% growth last quarter. Nobody trusts that. You still have a colossal real estate problem there that the government is moving around, the lump underneath the carpet, so to speak. And as they're sort of going through this grinding internal restructuring and this catastrophic demographic drop, right? I mean, just I've cited it before, and I know I cited it in the last call. If you're a 10-year-old child in China today, you live in a country that's just at approximately 1.5 billion people. So if you're 10 years old today in 2025, and you live to be 85, which would, right? Do I have that right? Yeah, 85. That would be the year 2100. Demographic estimates from the UN and the US, all the big demographer, the population of China will have plunged to somewhere between 400 and maybe 600 million people. I mean, that's just a radically different country. And everybody says, well, I read the other day somebody writing, well, it's okay. It'll sort of a glide path, and with technology, it'll make up an AI. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's the numbers. But societally, could you imagine, David, if you lived in a city like you live in Boston, or near Chicago, or here in any major city, and it's a third of the size, what that does in terms of morale and your vision for where your country's going. And that is just overwhelming. So they have all that going on. We're struggling here to reshape not just trade, but manufacturing, bringing it back here, and not, shoes and nails and whatever else went over in the 70s and 80s in China, but it's all about technology and semiconductors and reshoring for all of that for the future. So I think, bar none, that is the risk. That is and it will continue to be the largest, because of all of these internal tensions in our mutual countries, but also for the entire region, right? I mean, the Japanese live in fear of where China is, the tension there. North Korea, you can't forget that as sort of an ancillary weird situation of this insane kingdom that now has, dozens of nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles. The Japanese live in fear of them. The South Koreans live in fear of them. Where Australia is in all of this, where Vietnam, the tensions in Asia, you can see the bubbles because it's boiling. So bar none, it's China.
And how about some of their recent actions pushing further into the South China Sea, or threatening action against Taiwan? I mean, I guess that's all reaction to what you just explained.
Yeah, I think some of it is reaction. Some of it is also they perceived risks, right? The South China Sea, and their increased aggressiveness in the deep blue sea, by definition, which is unusual for them. When you look at it, and really what we're talking about is they're protecting supply lines, right? If they are a major manufacturer, but they're also a major importer. You think of all the oil they do not have the natural resources. And so all of their oil is coming from the Middle East or someplace else. And everything, it reminds me very much of where Japan was, that led to the breakout of World War II, right? It was why they were seizing Singapore and everything else and getting aggressive. It was supply lines. So I think that is a big part of it. It's also a matter of national pride. That is when you're in China and you see the news, they're doing this here and they're doing that there. It is their ability to tell the people, look how we are really expanding and we are a global power, right? It is a morale booster that they're trying to do. The Taiwanese situation is very tense. I still believe it's a lowish risk. I mean, like 20% or less, that there's going to be an invasion in the next 3 to 5 years, because one, what the rest of the world will do in reaction in terms of tariffs and sanctions on China. And they've got to feel even more insecure because of the tariffs and because manufacturing is leaving China and going to other places, right? They are no longer, there's not the risk of us cutting them off with that would end up hurting us in boomerang on all other major economies because of the diversification. But they also have to keep rattling the chain. And really trying to push Taiwan into a more supine posture, as they say, right? To get along, to be less independent. I don't see that happening. But the other risk to all this is when you follow this on a day-to-day basis, and being the nerd that I am, I do, right? The incursions of the Chinese Air Force into Taiwanese airspace of their ships, right, they're being provocative without actually doing anything kinetic, right? There's no shooting or anything else. But situations like that are really dangerous because somebody can make a mistake. And we've seen that in history, and suddenly somebody actually trips and pushes the button and a missile's fired, or two planes crash into each other and something. And that can be a spark. So that's the danger there, is that you end up with some sort of military action by mistake.
And how are the trade negotiations keep changing by the day too, right? They're so with access to rare earth or semiconductors, or so where does it stand? And now where will that take us?
David, as you were introducing me, I was trying to fix my tie because I'm just like trying to keep up with everything that's going on, right? It's like, oh, we've got to deal with Indonesia. What is it? Well, it's kind of a preliminary deal. What does that mean, right? That's kind of like my now wife. If I had gone to her before we gotten married and say, why don't we put out announcements that we've agreed to move towards getting engaged, and we just want everybody to know we're sort of pre-engaged. Yeah, buddy, that's not a deal. So there's an element of that. You look at the US-UK deal, there's really not much there. But and I know we'll get to the domestic because in a minute, in terms of one big beautiful bill and everything else, these things are just totally, they're not tangentially touching each other. One doesn't exist without the other. And for Trump, he's hauling it, they're pulling in a lot of money. It's well over $100 billion in terms of revenue, which is going to pay down the debt and to pay for the offset, the one big beautiful bill. So for Trump, I believe that in talking to his people, they won't outright tell you this. He's kind of incentivized to let this go for a while, another month or two, maybe longer, because of the money that's coming in. And a lot of people are assuming, looking at the first term, and certainly the way the president has conducted his business over the years, who went bankrupt and he always was big debt in his businesses, that he doesn't care about the deficit. I actually think he very much cares about the deficit because he sees if he can bring it down in some significant way, that will be a tremendous, irrefutable victory for him and his legacy, no matter what we think of him. Right. So I think that we are there. It is interesting that in some of the larger trading partners, whether it's the European Union, certainly with Japan, that's not in a good place, but that may change this weekend. Scott Bessent is going to Japan ostensibly to go to the the World Expo, which is being held in Osaka. It hasn't been announced yet. I do believe he will sit down, go to Tokyo and actually try and move the trade deals further. Also look at, Trump with great fanfare, as he always does, put out all those letters last week to all these, 100 countries. Who didn't get letters? And markets haven't really, and markets are they're just overwhelmed by everything. Notice India didn't get a letter. And I think there's probably something coming for a very real deal there. We will get to something on the EU. We will get something with Japan and South Korea and other major trading partners. And also, look, Trump is going to go to China probably in the next 2 or 3 months. It's being worked on now. I am aware of at least 30 Fortune 100 American CEOs are going to go with him. And so he's going to be hanging in front of him. We can bring investment back to China, and we can get a big, beautiful bill here, a big, beautiful treaty here. And so I think there's progress there as well. But for now, the revenue aspect, and I want, one thing to really remember here, there's a baseline of 10% tariffs that he's put on everybody. Those aren't going away. That's just the new normal. That's the new curbside that has just been built to the road that we're traveling. Everything else goes.
Will that eventually be the base? I mean, will all this be a tactic to receive lump sums in lieu of tariffs and essentially end up with 10% tariffs, but lots of, I don't want to say extorted money, but I mean that may be the revenue that's coming in.
Yes, and I point to Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, even saying something that was reported, I think, in Bloomberg today, that when we get a trade deal, there will be tariffs that will stay in place from the U.S. side. We're just going to have to get used to it. So I think it's just going to be a 10%. Every country is going to be paying 10%.
Right.
And Trump is going to use that to pay down the deficit. And he's going to have other mechanisms for that. One other thing, David, because I think this is very important to the entire real estate sector. Part of these deals that you're seeing with countries, and I point particularly to the Gulf states because that's where the bulk of it has come so far. If there's sort of a easy pass, if you will, that you can sort of attach to your trade talks, or you can go through the normal, very detailed trade talks. The easy pass is, okay, you guys pick a country. There's a big deficit here. Here's what you do. You commit to pay X trillion dollars in foreign direct investment in the United States.
Right.
And markets aren't believing. I had a meeting with about 30 hedge fund guys yesterday, and none of them think this is going to be real. They think it's phantom. I wouldn't discount it. Trump's raised between 10 to 11 trillion dollars in foreign direct investment so far. Gulf states, the Japanese, there's other countries, because they want to come here. And the real estate play in this, and I'm again looking as the test case here, is Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states. They want to invest in AI. They want to, and that's all data centers. That is all commercial real estate. And remember Trump coming out with Larry Ellison from Oracle and the CEO of SoftBank. That was their Project Stargate. It's all about AI, which is at its core a commercial real estate play. As everybody on this call knows better than I do.
And in addition to data centers, it's infrastructure investment because the two go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And maybe not today, maybe in a couple of years, we'll talk about the lunar data centers.
The lunar, yes. I know you've raised your hand to be stationed up there to be the,
should we jump into the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly, because I'm sure we'll get questions. Look, I think the Russia situation is going to be a to and fro. We saw with Trump. I just sort of, again, pull back and look from a larger perspective. I don't think the war is going to end anytime soon. And even if there's a ceasefire, the Russians will violate this. Putin is not in a good place. The economy is not in, it's in a bad place. And I still hold the view that Putin's worst nightmare is ending a war in which he did not succeed completely, pulling Ukraine back, and then, right, because he's made it almost a sacred, we've got, this is a core, Ukraine, Kiev. It's the birth of Russia was Kiev. Okay, he then says, okay, time out. We're okay. We're just going to stop here. And then you have a million soldiers who have been ground up by the minute, right? It's been one of the most brutal wars we have ever seen. It's I would argue, the most brutal war we've seen since World War I. The Russians have lost in casualties 1 million dead and wounded. You let all those guys come back to a weak economy, you're going to have a revolution. He can't let them back. You know, what's fascinating, last thing to this, to prove my point, most troops, when they finish their tour of duty in the fight, don't go home. People don't know this. They get put into a reserve unit that is in the southern frontier there. They're not allowed to go home. Some of them are, but a lot of them are not. And the other thing is, remember, he's emptied the prisons for soldiers. So what, you're going to let them all come back home? No. So he's trying to keep them down there. And that has turned into a lawless state area in Russia across the border. It's a mess. He has not planned to this. I remember, I quote George W. Bush about this, and I thought it was so brilliant. And it's playing out. Putin is all tactics and no strategy. So that's where we are there.
What is our stance today, though? Given the weapons to Ukraine, but they can't fly a certain distance. I mean,
yes, and we're now going to supply more and really ramp it up in 49 days. It was 50 yesterday, unless Putin agrees to a ceasefire, to which Putin is no. His answer today was a massive barrage of drones on Kiev again and other major cities. I think it just goes to show he's desperate. So we're going to probably ramp up and make the Russians really bleed.
So let's jump domestically. Big beautiful bill, lots in it. Maybe we just start with how favorable it is to real estate. Just get that out of the way.
Well, we've enshrined, right, capital gains, all the tax rates, which is great. I've got to even think to some degree, you know, that you've enshrined now that there's no tax on tips so every restaurant and hotel out there. I think that's probably going to be a good opportunity when we have a shortage of workers out there, legal workers, right? That boy, yeah, this is not a bad time. So I think there's all of that. It's, you know, once again carried interest, which must have pictures on everybody in Washington, right? It survived. So he's enshrined it, and it's passed, and there we go. And I think this has got to be all, you know, net positive for commercial real estate from a tax perspective overall. But we're not done. But we'll talk about that. We're not. Don't think of the one big beautiful bill as done. It is the first volume of a 3-volume set.
Okay. I mean, within that too, they extended opportunity zones and made access for low-income housing tax credits.
Yes.
So it's pretty widespread.
Pretty widespread.
But you're right. So the next volume is what? September 26th?
First week of October. So,
okay.
And markets have not, I put a note out on this, and markets haven't really paid attention to this, only because, again, how do you sort of net out the noise versus, and what's happening on the here and now versus sort of the bigger picture. So when you get in, I don't want to bore everybody with getting into the weeds of how the heck did Trump pull this off, right? I mean, you know, he got it signed on July 4th, and a week before, less than a week, it was chaos in the Senate just trying to get this thing passed. And you had 20 or 30 House Republican Freedom Caucus guys who were super, you know, deficit hawks. I'm not voting for whatever the Senate sends. It was a complete mess, but he got it done. The way he got it done was the first week of October. This goes to your question and my reference of this is a 3-volume set. The first week of October, after the fiscal year is completed, the House of Representatives is going to introduce another reconciliation bill. Another one big, beautiful bill, right? Which, to remind everybody, you can't filibuster in the Senate, but it has to be focused on tax, budget, or deficit. That can't have policy implications to that. So for those members who were squawking loudly about this, 2 things happened. Trump threatened to primary them, particularly the House members in the 2026 election. And he does this. He doesn't care if the seat goes Democrat, because his view is if you're opposing him, you're as good as a Democrat. So it's a net, right? He's done this in Arizona in Senate race. He's done other House members and doesn't care. So these guys freak out. Okay, all right, Mr. President, we get it. But the other thing was, so if you don't like something in OBA, One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we'll fix it in the next reconciliation bill. And to cut to the chase, they plan, as Speaker Johnson has said, and this is where the markets are missing it, they're going to do a third reconciliation bill in the spring of 2026. So again, we're just going to be constantly, and they are feverishly working on what the salt tax issue. I predict will come back up again in October. Can we do more refinements? Can we do more that's better there? The housing market, if it's not improved, is there something that we can do there in terms of more tax credits? Right? So sorry, everybody, your August holidays are canceled. You got to focus on what's coming and pay attention to all the little chatter of what these members are going to negotiate for, and it's open season.
As much as in the big beautiful bill, what are sort of the standouts? The border security, defense spending, what
Well, this is an interesting thing too, because again, we're all sort of a little shell-shocked and overwhelmed. Trump's big agenda was immigration when he's running. It was immigration reform. It was defense spending. It was making permanent the tax cuts. Well, he just achieved all three of them, right, arguably, in that bill. Now what? What does he do for the next 3.5 years? Because let me remind everybody, we're 6 months into this? It's like 6 years, right? So where does he go next? And I think that's why, from a market perspective, you got to start thinking about what he's been talking about and bringing it back up and put it, like if it's a murder mystery, you put it on the big board with the strings attached and start mapping this very specifically. He has talked repeatedly about floating, putting back out publicly Freddie and Fannie. He is very serious about that. So there is a way to do that. He has talked about the creation of a sovereign wealth fund. That is very real. We should talk about that. He is also going to do in this first reconciliation, the second reconciliation bill, and I think in the third one, let's put it this way. You can look at Elon Musk and Doge as it failed. It only cut 180 billion versus the 2 trillion that he promised. And then Trump gave him a pass and started saying only 1 trip, not even close. Okay, so Elon Musk comes in with a meat cleaver. And you're even already seeing in the 2026 budget they're putting forward, like he cut the heck out of NASA. They're quietly putting all the money back, right? So they're making modifications. And what was Doge has now been moved back into the Office of Management and Budget, the cabinet position that normally does this. You've got a really aggressive guy there, and his name is Russell Vought. And I would describe him, Musk with the meat cleaver. Russell is a world-class microsurgeon who knows how to get not under the bone. I found more fat here. So you're going to see a lot more institutional and careful institutional cutting of the federal budget, consolidation, right? More deficit reduction, and I think this is where Trump's going to start moving, is deficit reduction. Because one other thing, David, sorry, I'm babbling here, but I hope this is making sense. I think from a market perspective, I would strongly advise, when you start talking about Trump and 2026, and you hear people talking about that, it's a missed target. Everybody's assuming, the normal cycle of the 2026 election. And that's very important. I'm not denying that. But for Trump, 2026 is going to be the defining year of his legacy as a president on Independence Day, the 250th birthday of America. And I can tell you the White House is very focused on this. Whole teams, first off, it's going to be the biggest, most beautiful party you've ever seen, right? We're going to start hearing that. But where is America on Independence Day, 2026, the 250th birthday? And did Donald Trump make it better than ever? Or are we in trouble economically? Right? Is he like the epitome, of us losing our fastball as the world's greatest nation? Or boy, we've just notched, our fastball is now 20 miles faster than it ever was. That is what's going to define it for him. So he's very focused on that.
Well, his legacy as well as the midterms that are a couple, 2-3 months later.
Right, and that follows in, and he's already working on that, right? Some of you may have seen, how does he hold the House up as a sub-note to this? He is now working with the governor of Texas, where the state legislature is going to have an extraordinary session trying to redistrict 5 districts in Texas, so that they're locked in as new. They will flip from Democrat to Republican. And there's going to be, people are already screaming about it. It's like we were supposed to do redistricting like a year or so ago. That's how they're trying to save the House.
On the concept of sovereign wealth fund, I mean, that's usually when you have a surplus. What is surplus is coming from the trade deals or the cutbacks?
David, that's what I thought. And no, we're both wrong. Here's how you do it. Well, first, let me tell you, they've hired a team that is at the Treasury Department that is putting together the construct, everything that needs to be done to launch the sovereign wealth fund. They've been in place 4 or 5 months. There was a report that was to be given by them in early May to the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury explaining how it would work. And they've held that back because we're too busy with one big, beautiful bill. We're too busy with the tariff stuff. So this will be a big rollout. This will be another big, shiny thing that Trump puts out there. They may not do it, right? I got to put that caveat. Maybe it doesn't happen, but there's a lot of effort. So here's how you fund it. You move all the gold from Fort Knox into it. You can do that.
All this recently received FDI.
You can do all that. That's how you lock in the foreign direct investment, and so these countries don't back out in 2 years saying, well, we're having economic, well, we'll still do it maybe in 20 years. You do that. The US Treasury is sitting on an estimated $300 to $400 billion of confiscated crypto from criminal activity. You put that in there. There is multi-$100 billion Treasury foreign exchange stabilization fund. You put that in there. You start selling federal land. You put that in there. You refloat Freddie and Fannie and hold 10 or 20% of it, and the revenue that's spun out of it goes into it. Plus you hold the equity on it. Suddenly you're talking about some serious money. And what do you do with that money? It pays down the deficit. That's the plan. And that's not me guessing. This is me having conversations with senior Treasury officials I'm just repeating what I've heard.
Where do you want to go next? How about defense? Since it's not only us building up our defense, it's
how about we take a nap? I'm exhausted. That's where I want to go next. Defense. Yeah, I mean, that's a real interesting battle. And again, with serious commercial real estate implications, because going back to Russia for a moment, perfect example, we're not fighting wars anymore with so much rifles and artillery and fighter jets. It's all tech, right? And 56% of the casualties on the battlefield in Ukraine are from drones. for both sides.
Right.
So, this is where we're going. You're talking about entire fleets of fighter jets that are drone operated. You're talking about aircraft carriers that don't have a single sailor on. Well, that's all back home, right? So this is the big shift. This is also goes through the whole debate about support for Ukraine and our focus on NATO versus to what we talked about first is China. There is a real heavy fight going on inside the Trump administration as to where we should be putting these resources. And this played out a couple of weeks ago, for those of you who saw it in the headline, where there was a senior defense official who ordered the stoppage of military aid to Ukraine. When you read about him, his name is Elbridge Colby. He's the Undersecretary for Policy. He's very eloquent. I'm not saying I agree with him or disagree, but he is, hey, forget NATO. Russia's not a threat to us. The threat is in Asia. The future is in Asia, and we need to move everything there. Well, those are totally different, battle systems. One is all land-based, one is all sea-based. And if you're Boeing or Lockheed or Palantir, which is getting in the defense, any of these guys, okay, what are we doing on? Are we putting our bathing suit on, or are we putting on our hiking boots? Right? To put it crudely, this is the huge debate. And how does that play out? Which goes back to the tariffs. What's the future of U.S.-China relations? And tariffs will be the driving force of that.
Does modern weaponry make us more vulnerable than we've been?
I would argue yes. There was a very interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal today that looked at, in the paper edition, the Iranians, we whacked them pretty hard, and we can debate on how much we set them back on the nuclear side. The story talked about how the Iranians found significant weaknesses in the Israeli vaunted air defense, where 17 or 18% of their missiles, which aren't that sophisticated, not as sophisticated as the Chinese, right? They found their mark. So yeah, once again, the technological race. How do you improve, the Iron Dome? And this goes to why Trump is very serious about his Golden Dome, which he wants to put up, which is all satellite based, which goes back to, once again, tariffs, because he's sitting there beating the heck out of Canada. What he really wants from Canada, and is not being reported on, he wants Mark Carney and the Canadians, okay, we're contributing X hundreds of billions of dollars to this, because you can't have a Golden Dome anti-missile defense system just on the actual borders of the US. Canada has to be part of it. Oh, and who else has to be part of it? Greenland.
Right.
Yep.
All coming together.
Yep. And again, the commercial real estate piece, because it's all tech-based and it's all outsourcing. I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine who just retired from the CIA, and he ran all of their data centers. And let me tell you, he didn't give me any inside secrets, but it stunned me how much they outsource and bring in, yes, it may be private land, but now it's quote unquote CIA, right? Data centers. You can only imagine, mine can only spin as to how big that actually is.
Right. You mind going back to immigration policy, because the impact on real estate question I have, but a fellow CRE waged a question on, are you concerned about the impact of immigration policies on our population growth in the U.S., in particular labor force growth?
I'm very concerned, and I think I know there's just an unbelievable fight internally at the White House over how far we're going, right? We're not repopulating. If Trump had been president throughout his entire term and we didn't have all these border crossings during the Biden administration, we'd have a negative birth rate, basically.
Right.
Right? We're not having children for whatever reason. And we need the immigrants, and we all know this. And we need, by the way, H-1B visas for highly trained immigrants to come in here, with graduate degrees in technology and science for all of this tech that we're bringing back, right? Semiconductor manufacturing. Where are we going to get? Now you're scaring those people away. They don't want to come here. So what are we doing? Do we really think we're going to deport 15 million people? And there are people in the White House like Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff. Yeah, he thinks that's where we're going. And other people are looking at, and let me tell you, you've got CEOs at this point. They started out talking to Congress, going to people who they thought were members of Congress who were quote unquote Trump whisperers. You got to tell the president our business is going to die. You're going to see inflation here. We need these workers. And you saw Trump responded to that initially with, there was agriculture and the hotel industry. Yeah, okay, ICE should go everywhere but there. And then the battle, he got persuaded by Stephen Miller and other of these super hawks to keep going. He's going to have to figure this out. I think the hope is they're talking really tough, and they are giving the image that they're going to deport everybody, but that's to scare any illegal immigrant here to not even think about jaywalking, much less commit any other crime, because you'll end up in the Alcatraz and the Everglades type thing, right? Or Guantanamo, where they're actually sending people, and that they ease off in a month or two. But I'm worried because I see that fight going on internally. This is not settled. There's not a grand plan at this point.
I mean, what impact is it having on universities and even the future of universities? We don't have foreign students. There's a huge financial impact to America's universities.
Yeah.
We're also either losing or reallocating our research dollars. So is that what geographic impact is that having? I mean, he's waging it against the elites and trying to take money away from the Ivies and to other universities, as well as NIH funding, which would have a huge impact on life science, which is a major engine in this country.
Yes. Yes. And for now, I mean, it plays to a lot of the base, right?
Right.
A lot of the base hate the Ivies. There's, Harvard is a great institution, but boy, the level of hatred, right? And even quiet prejudice, they'd never let my kid in there. I hate that place. Yeah, it's kind of cool to see them get kicked down a few notches type thing. Yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes. What do you have a priority where you want to go next? How about we haven't talked about deregulation and what's happening with the Fed.
Oh, the Fed. Let's start there because, of course, that's so important. I've talked to, as late as yesterday, very senior aides to Scott Bessent, who tell me they really do not think that Trump's going to fire Powell. But as we noted when we started here, Trump is saying something now about I'm going to, and I worry because Trump sometimes throws stuff out. We've seen it, and I say this with respect to the president. He will throw out incredibly provocative statements that get everybody in a tizzy, and it distracts them from this and right. But then these things get a life of their own. And what comes out is just sort of a glib comment, glib insult. All of a sudden, maybe I have to follow through on that. And you're seeing this. I'm seeing this certainly here inside the Beltway, because if anybody hasn't followed this, it really actually matters. They're renovating the Federal Reserve, the main headquarters, the old temple, which was, if you're ever in there, yeah, it kind of needed it. Jay Powell's not in charge of the day-to-day costs, and the General Services Administration does this, right? It's like, yeah, I'm the tenant, I'm not the guy. Everybody on this call knows this better than I don't even have to explain it. And all this stuff is coming out about new marble being put in and a super VIP lunchroom, and they're going to put beehives there to help, for environment. I'm a beekeeper, so I'm all in favor of it. I actually think it's a brilliant thing. Bees are dying everywhere. If bees go extinct, everybody, we go extinct. They pollinate. They're so critical. Great, just put a beehive and pay some guy, $20 an hour to check on them every other day. Whatever. But he's being pilloried for this, and as they're arguing, that's the cause for why you should fire him, right? Mismanagement. My sense is, I think that would be, if that happens, the markets are going to really react, particularly the Treasury market. People are going to say, uh-oh, and everything I'm being told is Bessent doesn't want to see this happen. But now let's flip this, and I can't predict. I don't think Trump's going to fire him, but let's see. I think the search, though, for a replacement we've kind of got the short list already. And let's run through that quickly. We've seen it's Kevin Hassett, the National Economic Council director, top economic advisor to the president inside the White House. It's Kevin Warsh, a former Fed governor, who's now out at Hoover, the Hoover Institution at Stanford. Christopher Waller, who is seen as a Republican Fed governor there now. Michelle Bowman, who's another Republican governor and vice chair for supervision. And that's it, other than Scott Bessent. Well, there was as a Treasury official told me, he's not giving me any inside information, but he said, look, I would point to, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal about 2-3 weeks ago. And he said, the most important line in that said, whoever Trump picks, he has to be comfortable with them. Meaning he's got to have a relationship. He's got to, okay, he likes Waller. He said nice, and Bowman. He doesn't know them.
Right.
I don't see Kevin Warsh going in and out of the White House every day. I don't think there's a relationship there. Hassett has got a lot of critics inside the administration that he's not strong enough and forceful enough in defending the policies. So who's that leave? And here's my $5 down on the betting table. It's going to be Scott Bessent. And I will give a reason for that. We've talked about the Trump agenda going forward. Think of what Bessent's done. He's quarterbacked one big, beautiful bill and all the tax stuff. He is the lead and executor on all of the trade stuff, which is kind of interesting because normally it's the Secretary of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative. And instead, the president has Bessent doing it all. So he's delivering on all of that. If there's a sovereign wealth fund launch, probably later this fall, that'll be Bessent.
Right.
And then what? What are the big to-do list for Scott Bessent? There's nothing else, barring some crisis. So is Bessent just going to be sitting there for the final 3 years, filling a seat? I think that's the last thing he's going to want to do. I think he'll step down rather than have nothing to do, right? Treasury will recede. And for Trump, he's very comfortable with Bessent. Bessent, everything I hear, has a great way of explaining things to the president without talking down to him, a true loyal aide, but also will speak truth to power. So I think Trump says, thanks, Scott, for going through all these guys, but you're the guy, and I want you. The other thing is this. It really comes down to who is on the Federal Open Market Committee as soon, because and do you have enough votes? I think Powell will probably serve out his term, but who knows? But notice Bessent said this morning that he hopes Powell steps down from the Fed when his term expires. He can stay on as a governor, as Fed Governor Michael Barr has done. Barr was picked by Biden to be vice chairman for supervision of banks, and they didn't, right? They kind of squeezed him, and his time was coming to an end. They put Michelle Bowman, but he decided to stay. I don't think Powell's going to stay for Fed chair's never going to stay just sitting around, just being just another governor. So he leaves. Adrian Kugler, another governor, leaves in January. So, and I've heard rumors that Phil Jefferson, the vice chair for monetary policy, may leave in the early 2026 too. So you have 3 openings for Trump to fill. He'll have, right? I think that's the game plan. And on deregulation, quickly on that, that has been slow to move. And mostly because, one, there's 2 areas that Trump, I would argue, has, if you're a report card, I'd give him a C or a D on. One is the deregulatory effort, and he's been very slow and behind on nominating regulators, right? We still don't have he just nominated last week who he wants at the FDIC, right? Last week, the comptroller of the currency, Jonathan Gould, who I've known for a number of years, just got confirmed. We've got Paul Atkins at the SEC. We just have a new CFTC chair, just brand new, right? And there are no commissioners at the CFTC. There's just a chairman. At the National Credit Union Association, there's 1 member, the chairman. You should zoom in to watch the board meetings. He calls to order. All those in favor of the minutes, he raises his hand, it passes. He puts regulation, all those in favor. He's the only dude. So he's deficient on that, but that's coming. And the other aspect of it has been, and I've talked to some of these senior, because I know them, the Chevron decision, the Supreme Court handed down, and I'll be brief, has kind of screwed things up. Because if you're the chairman of the SEC, and I say to you, what is your deregulatory agenda? The answer is I don't really know yet, because I've got to see what all the trade associations for the American Bankers Association, the mortgage guy, everybody, who are now going to start suing on regulations, because they'll say under the Chevron decision, this regulation, they're unconstitutional. So if I'm the regulator, I don't want to be dogpiling. I want force multiplication. Okay, you trade associations are going to pursue those lawsuits. I'm going to do these things. So that's the struggle. And the second thing he's deficient on, he is way behind in nominating judges. Way behind, which will have longer term impact on markets in some way.
Certainly. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We could go on for hours here. I know you could too. So I want to thank you again, Frank, for being here. It's a privilege and a pleasure to have you. I hope we can do it again soon.
Anytime, David. It's fun working with you guys, and you're very kind to have me.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
John, I'll turn it over to you. You're on mute, John.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Frank and David. This was just an excellent and very informative presentation. The real estate world is long understood. The change comes principally in 5 basic forms: cycles, trends, maturation, change of state, and disruption. And in our complex world, these basic forms of change are rarely found in this pure state. Most often we find them in interacting in some combination. A counselor is a link between defining a problem and devising a solution, who sees the big picture, connects the dots, and resolves uncertainty by crafting a framework for decision-making, an agenda for action, and a roadmap for success by answering questions like, what should I do? How should I do it? What are the risks, and how do I mitigate them? I would encourage you to consider engaging a designated counselor of real estate when seasoned advice or a solution to a complex real estate matter is needed. Or perhaps you might consider becoming one of us and seek an invitation to membership in the counselor's organization. You can visit CRE.org to learn more about that. And as you can see, you'll be among some peers with which you can really share your expertise. Please join us next week, July 23rd, for Lessons Learned, 5 years after the pandemic. You can register at CRE.org. And until then, on behalf of the Counselors of Real Estate, thanks again to David and Frank. And thank you for attending this session of What's Next for Real Estate and the Life Experience. Until next time, see you. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.